So I've been wearing the upcoming Air Jordan 1 85 for the last week now, and I've got some thoughts. So when I say I've been wearing the shoe for the last week, I mean literally anytime I left the house. And whenever I left the house for the entire day, this was the only shoe I'd wear. I wore it when I played a show on Saturday night. I wore it to set up church the next morning. I wore it when I went to the gym. I wore it when I went to the office. I wore it literally every time I stepped outside of the house. And I've got to admit, I still love this shoe. I have a lot of sneakers. I have hundreds of sneakers, way too many pairs of shoes. And usually after wearing a pair of shoes a couple times, the shine starts to wear off a little bit. The excitement about throwing that pair of shoes on starts to wear off. But I'm not gonna lie, this shoe, I get excited about rocking it every time I throw it on. So if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know that the Bred Air Jordan 1s are my favorite sneaker of all time. Specifically, the original 1985 Air Jordan 1 Breds. So when this pair was announced recently, the new version, which is supposed to look one-to-one exactly the same like the 1985 pair, I lost my mind. I was so excited. And last week when I first got this pair in the mail, I did a full review on the sneaker, and if you guys want to check that out, there will be a link at the top of the screen. I dived into the history of the shoe, I dived into the materials, and everything about this shoe that people were interested in. But what I learned after dropping that review is that there's more stuff that people want to know about this shoe than I even thought of. And so over the last week, I asked people on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube what they wanted to know about the upcoming Air Jordan 1 85. So in today's video, not only am I going to give you my own personal opinions on this shoe after wearing it every single day for an entire week, but also answer some of the burning questions that you have that maybe my review didn't answer for you. So because 2025 is the 40th anniversary of the Air Jordan 1, I feel like it's important to give you guys some history about this shoe. The Air Jordan 1 is literally the shoe that started it all. This is the very first pair of Jordan sneakers. Yes, he did wear other pairs of shoes like the Nike Airships, but this is the very first Michael Jordan signature shoe. And as you may or may not know, there is actually a pretty colorful history behind this colorway in particular, the Bred colorway, or I guess the black and reds. And that's because during Michael Jordan's rookie season, he wore pairs of black and red Nike Airships, which was actually against the NBA's uniform guidelines. In fact, back then, your shoes had to be primarily white. And so because Michael repeatedly wore these black and red shoes, the NBA fined him $5,000 a game. But Nike, in their infinite marketing wisdom, decided to turn this into a marketing opportunity for the upcoming Air Jordan 1 in the black and red colorway. So what Jordan Brand did was have Michael continue to wear the shoes during NBA games and pay these fines for him. And so when it came time for the Jordan 1s to release, they dropped one of the most iconic ads of all time. So not only is the Air Jordan 1 an iconic looking basketball shoe, literally the first Jordan sneaker, but it's also got a really incredible story that goes along with it. And that's also why the black and red Air Jordan 1s, or Bred ones, are called the banned ones, because this colorway was literally banned by the NBA for a period of time. Obviously the design of the Air Jordan 1 is inspired by other Nike basketball sneaker, but Peter Moore created something with the Air Jordan 1 that sort of has transcended basketball sneakers in general. This silhouette is so beautiful. I know I always gush over this shoe, and I continue to gush over the Air Jordan 1 Bred because it truly is my favorite sneaker of all time, but he created a silhouette that is unmatched in my opinion. No other sneaker has ever gotten to the level of clean lines and overall wearability of the Jordan 1. Of course I am biased, I'm not gonna lie there, but this sneaker, it's fire. But now let's talk about this release specifically. The release dropping in February for a retail price of $250. This pair of Air Jordan 1 85s in the Bred colorway is actually a one-for-one remake of the 1985 Air Jordan 1s. In fact, what Jordan Brand did was actually 3D scan the sneaker to create something that was literally as close to the original as possible. Now, unfortunately, my pair of 85 Air Jordan 1s is a size 13, and my pair of 85 Jordan 1s is a size 9, so they do look different because the sizes are so extremely different. However, when you look at the shoes close up, you notice that a lot of the panels on the upper of the shoe, even though the original 85 pair is pretty heavily worn, and actually now my pair is getting closer to that, you still see a lot of the similarities. You see the way that the toe slopes forward. You see how the back of the shoe kind of goes straight up and down. You see the shape of the midsole and how it kind of curves along with the side of the shoe. And then if you look at the back of the shoe, you'll notice that the midsole sort of slopes towards the bottom of the sneaker, a detail which we haven't had on Jordan 1s, I think, since the originals. But that actually leads me into a question from I Am Making Art on Instagram, who says, are they actually noticeably better than the last 85 Breds? Now, to be fair, there are no other 85 Breds other than the original actual 85 Breds, but what I'm assuming he's referring to is the Varsity Red Air Jordan 1 85s. Now, that shoe was a pair of sneakers that released back in 2020 for All-Star Weekend, and was actually the first version of the 85 Air Jordan 1s, which essentially was a reimagining of the sneaker to look similar to the original. And since 2020, a few pairs of Air Jordan 1 85s have released: the neutral grays, the metallic reds, the Georgetowns, a lot of colorways that are very clean, some OG, but were designed to look like the original Air Jordan 1. Now, what's interesting about this pair is that apparently this pair has actually been redesigned once again. And I'm actually gonna buy a pair of the Varsity Reds and compare it side by side and see if that's actually the case. So let me fast forward a couple days until I actually get that pair in the mail. Alright, so I have kind of an interesting test that I want to conduct. I want to compare one of the first Air Jordan 1 85s, not the actual pair from 1985, but the pairs that released in like 2020, to the upcoming Air Jordan 1 85 that I've been wearing a bunch since I got it. So what I did is I went on GOAT, I bought a pair of the early ones, and I'm going to compare it side by side, see what the differences are. Let's see. Alright, so here's the box. Top right there, it looks like it's a slightly different box. Now this is the Varsity Red colorway that dropped back, I think in February, also for All-Star Weekend of 2020, so 5 years ago at this point. It comes in this red box versus the black and red Air Jordan 1 box. So let's pop the top on these guys. Oh, I forgot about this packaging. So these came with like these really cool suede dust bags that I think actually have the numbers on them. I think this is, yeah, it's a numbered pair out of 23,000. Right there, so I got number 9,745 out of 23,000. But here they are. The Air Jordan 1 85s. I think the second Air Jordan 1 85s to release. The first pair was the pair that, what was it called? New Beginnings pack. It was the New Beginnings pack, which I think is actually dropped in price, and I kind of want to grab. Dude, it's, oh, the lowest ask is $8.90, so it's not dropped in price that much, but it has dropped in price a little bit. It came with the Air Jordan 1 85s, and then also the Nike Airship, which I don't think it released at the time either. So this was the first solo release of just the Air Jordan 1 85, and again, it released February of 2020. And back then, the idea was that it was supposed to look very similar to the original 1985 Air Jordan 1s. Now, what's interesting is that even just looking at it by itself, there's a lot of things about this shoe that, while they are closer to the original than some of the more recent Air Jordan 1 releases, compared to the new upcoming Air Jordan 1 85s, there are some differences. I'm noticing them right off the bat, and I didn't think it was going to be that dramatic of a difference, and while it's not like hugely different, there are definitely things that are different. And of course I'm going to lace these guys up, throw these guys on feet, and we'll compare them on foot side by side and see if they fit different, if they feel different on foot. The toe area on the upcoming Breds is more swept back than the toe on the 2020 pair. And the heel area on the 2020 pair, it's closer to some of the, I guess, more recent Jordan 1s where it kind of arcs forward. On this pair, it doesn't arc back, but it almost looks like it does. It kind of goes straight up and down. So those are some differences I've already noticed right off the bat. Material-wise, feels pretty similar. I mean, the leathers feel pretty similar. This, I think, on the newer pair is slightly nicer. This feels more like your classic Air Jordan 1 leather. Could be wrong about that, but another difference that I've noticed just in pictures online is that the heel area of the shoe, or I guess the midsole of the shoe, on this pair is kind of straight up and down, whereas the midsole on this pair slants towards the bottom of the shoe. Now that's not something that just happened on my particular pair, that's something that's just true for all of the new 85s that are dropping this year. They all have that sort of midsole that slants towards the bottom of the shoe, which I believe was taken from the original 85s. And I think all of the previous 85 releases didn't have that, they were closer to this. Which means that they had to actually completely redo the midsole tooling on this shoe for this drop, which might be one of the reasons why it's so much more expensive. And comparing the textures on these shoes, the texture is different on the new release versus the older release. So they did definitely change the midsole tooling. I mean, the outsole looks similar, but not exactly the same. I mean, textures change a little bit. This one arcs up a bit more towards the heel than this one does. Granted, I have been wearing this pair a lot, so it's kind of gotten a little bit of heel drag, but not like a huge amount. So this colorway I think is based on like a PE or a sample or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they gave it a sample tag. It's got a bunch of specs of the shoe, like the colorway, the size, the date, November 14th, 84, Jordan Pro BB, made in China. So I can pretty confidently say that the new Air Jordan 1 85 is definitely a new shoe compared to the older 85s. Not just obviously a new colorway and being a newer shoe. They definitely changed up the cut of the shoe and the midsole of the shoe. The midsole is definitely the harder part because they literally have to cut new molds, which is a very expensive process. The upper of the shoe is just, cutting a different upper shape. But they did change things up, which I didn't totally expect, I'll be real with you. I thought that it'd be a lot more similar than it is. And sure, it is. I mean, it's similar. The older 85 is taller too towards the heel. Interesting. Let me lace these guys up, throw them on feet, and see if there's any difference in actual feel. Alright, so on this very windy day, probably not the best time to film this, but I have to do it today because I really want to try this shoe out. I'm going to compare the new Bred 85s that are dropping this February to the pair that dropped back 2020. It's not a Bred, it's technically the reverse Bred, but it's similar enough, and find out whether these feel the same on foot. So without further ado, let's just throw one on each foot, see what happens. Here we go, trying to get blown over in this wind. It might not sound crazy, but let me tell you, all my chairs back there are blown over. Also, we got the full APTHCRY fit on. We got the new upcoming Valentine's Day tee. We got the red socks that you guys saw earlier, and some sample pants, which actually never released. But still, initial impressions, they feel really similar. I would say that the 2020 pair feels a bit tighter, but I really think it's because I've worn the newer pair a lot more. Like, I've been wearing this one almost for an entire week. This is the first time I'm throwing these on. It does feel a bit tighter around the sides of my foot, and the leather feels a bit stiffer, but again, I really think it's because I broke this pair in. So in that sense, I guess it's tighter, but I really think if I wore this for the same amount of time as this pair, it would feel the same. Underfoot cushion, because the insoles are different, I would say that they are really similar. On the 2020 pair, the insole is sort of a soft rubbery foam. Of course, you have your air unit in the heel. On the 2025 pair, there is, I think, a piece of foam that's sort of inserted into the forefoot of the shoe in addition to the regular foam that's going on underneath your foot. And it is, it doesn't make a difference from what I can tell. They feel very, very similar on foot, especially when I rock back and forth like I usually do for my comfort tests. They feel very similar on foot. You can't really even feel the air unit in either one. That's just always been the case with Jordan 1s. But sizing wise, I would say they both fit the same. I'd say the 2020 pair fits true to size, so does the 2025 pair, as most Jordan 1s do. I would say that these fit just like any other pair of Jordan 1s. So whatever you usually grab in Jordan 1s, you should be fine to grab in your Bred 85s from 2025. So I guess that answers the question, do these new 85s feel like the regular 85s? And the answer is yes. Pretty much exactly the same. They actually, to be fair, also feel just like most other pairs of Jordan 1s, so. Alright, so differences are there, but they are somewhat minimal. I will say though that the newer version of the 85 Breds are closer to the original Breds than the 85 Varsity Breds. So I am making art, I hope that answers your question. But let me tell you guys what it was like wearing this pair of sneakers for a week. So first time throwing them on, they felt good. Air Jordan 1s generally feel pretty good out of the box. Now I will be honest, this thicker leather does take some time to break in. Actually, let me grab my fresh out of the box Air Jordan 1 Breds from 2016. I have a pair that I've worn a bunch, but this is a pair that I got off the sneakers app back in the day, or I guess Nike's website. Here's my old receipt. And yeah, it is sparkly. I'm not gonna lie, it is sparkly. But if you compare the leather of this shoe to the leather of the current, or I guess the new Air Jordan 185s, it is significantly softer. Now with that being said, is softer a good thing? Not always. In fact, the Air Jordan 185's leather actually seems to be thicker and probably more premium. Now I can't tell you that for sure, but I will say that it does feel more premium in hand. It feels thicker, it feels like there's more weight to it, it feels like it's a much more premium cut. Wow, this one is sparkly. Hold on, let me grab my non-sparkly pair. Another thing I really like about the thicker leather is that it creases in a nicer way than the leather in the 2016 pair. If you see, this one got kind of wrinkly all over the top, and granted it is tumbled leather, so it's gonna get a bit wrinklier. This one kind of just has one sort of subtle crease right there across the midfoot, which is not bad. The rest of the shoe, not really creasing, because the leather is thicker. But hey, the ultimate test is looking at the original 1985 Air Jordan 1s, and these look sick. I love the wear and tear on this pair of shoes. It just looks amazing. And I'm hopeful that that's what this pair of 85s is gonna look like after I've worn this shoe for a couple of years. Joel Cook 6630 says, how's the comfortability and leather quality? Well, we just covered the leather quality, but as far as comfortability goes, it's all right. Jordan 1s are not the most comfortable shoes in the world. I can't lie to you there. And I will say that this thicker leather does take time to break in. The first couple times I wore this shoe, the area right here where it creased, kind of hurt. It wasn't terrible. It was just like a pair of Nike SB Dunks from like 2012, like a slightly thicker leather pair of Nike SB Dunks. But once I wore these for like 2 days, they were fine. In fact, they are more comfortable now than they were back when I first put them on. The insole, a little bit more packed out, but still pretty soft. The upper of the shoe, while the leather has not really gotten softer, it has loosened up a little bit. Same thing with the laces, because obviously when you wear laces, they slowly stretch out over time. The leather on the upper hasn't gotten softer per se, but it has loosened up a little bit, which feels really nice. And now it's almost like a one-to-one fit with my shoe. I think it'll get more like that, like a pair of Birkenstocks, the more that you wear it. And realistically, I've only worn this shoe for a week. Sure, I've worn this shoe every day for hours and hours and hours, but still, in the grand scheme of things, this is a shoe I'm throwing on all the time. So it will get more comfortable and softer the more that you wear it. Now, something that's kind of interesting about this shoe, which I didn't know when I first got it, and some people on Twitter asked me about, was the bottom of the insole. Now you can see how thick the foam is right here. It's pretty thick and it feels pretty good underfoot. Of course, you've got an air unit in the heel of the shoe. You can say I've worn the shoe a lot. But on the bottom of the insole, you have this Chinese writing. Now what's interesting about this Chinese writing is that this is actually a callback to the original Air Jordan 185, which also featured the same exact writing. And what this writing says, if you translate it, is excellent quality. And that's because one of the factories that made these shoes back in 1985 featured this on the bottom of their insoles. That's why it's on the bottom of this shoe. And the reason people were asking about it on Twitter is because the fake pairs might not feature this detail, which is kind of wild to think about. Usually when you see Chinese lettering on the bottom of your insole, it's not always a good thing. But in this case, it's actually a legitimate callback to the original 1985 Air Jordan 1s, which is a very, very cool addition. Now, in terms of scuffing and things like that, again, it's only really been a week. The only real wear that I've seen on the shoe besides dirt is some heel drag, which is going to happen whenever you wear a rubber outsole shoe. But when it comes to scuffing, very, very minor. I mean, I haven't been light on these shoes. I haven't been trying to not scuff these up. I'm trying to wear these in every situation. And so far, so good. I guess there are some light scratches on the side of the heel right here, but that's about it. Francis Picurin on Twitter says, overall, this or the 2016 pair. In my opinion, as a huge Jordan 1 Bred fan, this every single day of the week. And the reason for that is because it looks like my favorite pair of sneakers, the original 1985 Air Jordan 1 Breds. And while I love the 2016 pair, this pair it's it. This pair is it for me, man. It's crazy. Hass from My First Kicks Pod says, heard someone say you gotta go up a half size. Is that true? In my opinion, no. I think this shoe fits true to size. For me, it fits just like every other pair of Air Jordan 1s, and that's really what I recommend for you. Whatever size you wear in standard Air Jordan 1s, grab that in this shoe. Again, compared to other Jordan 1s, it is going to have a longer break-in time because the leather is thicker and stiffer, so keep that in mind when you throw these on. But it's not really a fit issue, it's more of just the material's different. Basketball Days Light says, when is it releasing? Now that's an interesting question. So I've heard a couple different things. I've heard February 7th and February 14th. Now that date, from what I'm hearing, could be the date that these shoes release at neighborhood stores. There's 23 Jordan brand stores or Jordan brand carrying stores that are releasing this shoe. It's possible that that could be the release date for these shoes at those retailers. I've also heard February 14th. And I've also heard that there may or may not be an online release. So the release information is very cloudy. Now I do know the retail price is gonna be $250, which yes, initially I was like, that's crazy. But then the more that I've worn these shoes, I'm like, okay, for the quality that you're getting, the fact that this is my favorite shoe of all time, so yeah, okay, maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but for the quality, I think it might actually be worth that price point. What was I talking about? The release date. Yeah, so release dates are for the 7th and the 14th. I know we will know more once we get closer to the release date, but keep in mind those two dates because it's probably gonna be one of the two, and it could be both. There could be an online release on the 14th, I'm not totally sure, but I know the shoe is incredibly limited, so it's possible that it only releases in store. But I have no official word from anyone from Jordan Brand or any official retailer, so I don't know for sure. I do want to shout out Jordan Brand, by the way, for supporting the channel and sponsoring today's video. They didn't tell me what to say or what to do, they just said, talk about the shoe, and I was like, bet, I was already gonna make this video, so perfect. With that being said, after rocking this shoe for a week, I genuinely love this shoe. It's my favorite sneaker of all time. It's been my favorite sneaker of all time. You guys can check out my review, like I mentioned earlier, and learn all the little details about this sneaker. But I mean, for me, and I hate to say this early in the year, but this is a contender for Sneaker of the Year. And again, it might be because I'm biased, because I love this shoe so much, and I have the 85 version, and I've just loved this shoe since I love Jordans. But yeah man, I don't see another shoe from any brand, Jordan Brand, Nike, anyone else, coming close to this one in terms of how excited I am about it. But yeah, quality-wise, I've had no issues with it. Comfortability-wise, it's fine, gets the job done. Design-wise, gorgeous. Definitely recommend going for it. It's gonna be tough, but I think it's worth it. But hey, with that being said, make sure to let me know your thoughts on this shoe in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.